Texas is known for its massive deserts, empty highways, and endless open land. But hidden beneath that landscape are stories many people wish had been forgotten. Unsolved murders. Entire groups of people who vanished without explanation. A disaster so violent it destroyed an entire city within minutes. And isolated regions where investigators still search for answers decades later. Because some of the darkest mysteries in America did not happen in secret. They happened in Texas. The day an entire city was destroyed in minutes. On the morning of April 16th, 1947, the city of Texas City looked completely normal. Workers moved through the port as ships unloaded cargo along the harbor. Children prepared for school. Businesses opened for the day beneath clear Texas skies. Nobody realized that within minutes, one of the deadliest industrial disasters in American history was about to erupt directly in the center of the city. It began aboard a French cargo ship carrying thousands of tons of ammonium nitrate, a chemical commonly used as fertilizer, but also capable of becoming violently explosive under extreme heat. Shortly after a fire started inside the vessel, smoke began pouring from the cargo hold. Crowds gathered near the harbor to watch. Some people even brought their children closer to the docks to see the smoke rising above the ship. Then everything changed. At approximately 9 in the morning, the vessel exploded with such force that entire sections of Texas City were instantly destroyed. The blast shattered buildings miles away. Massive fires erupted across the port, while debris rained down from the sky across the surrounding neighborhoods. Witnesses described the explosion as looking like the end of the world. The shockwave became so powerful that some people were thrown from their homes without understanding what had happened. Windows shattered across nearby towns, while smoke and flames consumed huge portions of the city within minutes. And the destruction did not stop there. A second ship, carrying additional chemicals, later exploded as fires continued spreading through the harbor. By the end of the disaster, hundreds of people were dead and thousands more were injured. Entire families disappeared during the explosions. Some victims were never fully identified. Even today, the Texas City disaster remains one of the deadliest industrial accidents in United States history. But what makes the tragedy especially disturbing is how quickly ordinary life vanished. One moment, people stood peacefully along the harbor, watching smoke rise into the morning sky. Moments later, entire sections of the city no longer existed. Survivors later described scenes of complete devastation. Burning buildings, twisted metal scattered across the streets, emergency crews searching through rubble while fires continued erupting around them. For years afterward, many residents claimed the city never fully recovered psychologically from what happened that day. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that the disaster was not caused by war, not by an attack, not by a natural disaster, but by a chain of events that spiraled out of control in the middle of an ordinary morning. And while the Texas City explosion left behind destruction visible to the entire country, some of Texas's darkest mysteries became terrifying precisely because nobody saw them happen at all, especially inside a small yogurt shop in Austin, where a brutal crime still remains surrounded by unanswered questions. The night 4 girls never made it home. On the night of December 6th, 1991, 4 teenage girls were working inside an I can't believe it's yogurt shop in Austin, Texas. By the next morning, all 4 were dead. The crime scene shocked investigators across the country and quickly became one of the most disturbing unsolved murder cases in Texas history. The victims had been closing the store for the night when something went horribly wrong. Sometime after the business officially closed, attackers entered the shop. What happened inside over the following hours remains deeply horrifying even decades later. During the early morning hours, a fire erupted inside the building. Firefighters arriving at the scene initially believed they were responding to a normal structure fire. Then they entered the shop. Inside, investigators discovered the bodies of the 4 girls in the back of the store. The crime scene revealed signs of extreme violence. The victims had been bound before the fire was intentionally set, apparently in an attempt to destroy evidence connected to the murders. Austin police immediately launched a massive investigation. Witnesses reported seeing suspicious individuals near the shopping center that night. Detectives collected physical evidence from inside the building, while the entire city became consumed by fear and anger. over what had happened. But despite the scale of the investigation, the case quickly became complicated. Over the years, several suspects were arrested and questioned. At one point, multiple men were charged after giving confessions connected to the murders, but the investigation later became heavily criticized after concerns emerged regarding how those confessions had been obtained. Eventually, the convictions were overturned, and once again the case returned to being unsolved. More than 3 decades later, investigators still cannot fully explain exactly who committed the murders inside the yogurt shop that night. The case continues haunting Austin because of how ordinary the evening initially seemed. 4 teenagers finishing a normal work shift inside a small local business. Then silence, then fire, then one of the darkest crime scenes in Texas history. Even today, the murders remain surrounded by unanswered questions, conflicting theories, and lingering frustration from investigators who still believe critical pieces of the case remain missing. And perhaps what makes the mystery especially disturbing is that somebody out there likely knows exactly what happened inside that building, but nobody has ever fully told the story. And while the yogurt shop murders remain frozen in the past, another mystery connected to Austin has continued unfolding in recent years. One involving a lake where bodies kept appearing under increasingly unsettling circumstances. The bodies found in the water. In recent years, a growing number of deaths connected to Lady Bird Lake in Austin, Texas began attracting national attention online. At first, the incidents appeared unrelated. Young men were reported missing after nights out in downtown Austin. Days later, their bodies were discovered in or near the water surrounding the lake. Authorities often ruled the deaths as accidental drownings connected to alcohol, darkness, or disorientation near the shoreline. But as the cases continued, public concern began growing rapidly. People online started noticing similarities between the victims. Many disappeared after visiting bars or entertainment districts near downtown Austin, before somehow ending up near the lake during the late-night hours. Theories quickly spread across social media. Some people believed there had to be a serial killer operating in the city. Others suspected the cases were connected through circumstances investigators had not publicly revealed. Rumors exploded online as videos discussing the deaths gained millions of views. And because the incidents kept happening, the fear only intensified. By 2023, the mystery surrounding Lady Bird Lake had become one of the most discussed true crime topics in America. Austin police repeatedly stated that they had found no evidence confirming a serial killer. Officials explained that the area surrounding the lake contains poorly lit paths, steep drop-offs, and dangerous sections near the water that become especially hazardous late at night. And realistically, those explanations are possible. Large crowds, alcohol, darkness, and water can become a deadly combination in almost any city, but many residents still felt unsettled by the pattern, especially because several victims reportedly disappeared under circumstances friends described as unusual. Some became separated from their groups shortly before vanishing. Others were last seen walking alone near downtown areas before suddenly disappearing completely. The mystery surrounding the lake became amplified by the atmosphere of the location itself. At night, large sections of the trails become quiet and isolated, despite being close to the center of Austin. Reflections move across the dark water, while long stretches of shoreline disappear into shadow beneath bridges and trees. And perhaps that environment helped fuel the growing paranoia surrounding the deaths. Because once people begin connecting separate tragedies together, every new incident starts feeling more sinister than the last. Even now, debates continue online regarding whether the cases truly represent a hidden pattern or simply a series of tragic accidents occurring in the same location. But regardless of the explanation, the fear surrounding Lady Bird Lake became very real. And while the mystery terrified modern Austin, another region in Texas had already spent decades becoming infamous for disappearances far more disturbing. A stretch of isolated land where investigators uncovered one horrifying case after another. The stretch of land filled with unsolved deaths. Along a desolate stretch of Interstate 45 between Houston and Galveston lies an area that became known for one of the darkest patterns of unsolved crimes in Texas history. For decades, bodies were discovered scattered across isolated fields and remote roadsides surrounding the region. Many of the victims were young women, Some disappeared while hitchhiking. Others vanished after leaving work, school, or local neighborhoods before never being seen alive again. Eventually, investigators began referring to the area as the Texas Killing Fields. The name itself became infamous across the country. One of the earliest known cases connected to the region emerged in 1971 when the body of a young woman was discovered in an isolated field near the highway. Over time, additional victims continued appearing across the surrounding areas under similarly disturbing circumstances. And despite multiple investigations spanning decades, many of the murders remain unsolved even today. The isolation of the region became one of the biggest problems for investigators. Large sections of land surrounding Interstate 45 were empty, undeveloped, and difficult to monitor at night. The highway itself connected several major cities, making it easy for offenders to move through the area without attracting attention. As more cases emerged, theories began growing around the possibility that multiple serial killers may have operated within the region over different periods of time. Several suspects were eventually investigated. Some were linked to individual murders. Others were never fully charged, despite years of suspicion. But no single explanation ever solved the full mystery surrounding the killing fields. And perhaps that is what makes the case so disturbing. The crimes were not hidden deep inside forests or remote mountains. They happened near highways. People drove every single day. Parents became terrified after daughters disappeared without warning. Communities across the region lived with constant fear as reports of new victims continued appearing over the years. Even experienced investigators admitted the scale of the cases became psychologically exhausting. Because with every discovery came the realization that more victims might still remain unidentified somewhere across the empty land. The Texas Killing Fields eventually became one of the most infamous unsolved crime regions in America. Documentaries, books, and investigations continued revisiting the cases for decades, while families waited for answers that never fully arrived. And even today, parts of the region still feel unsettlingly isolated after dark. Miles of open land, empty roads, very few lights. The kind of landscape where someone could disappear frighteningly fast. But perhaps nowhere in Texas feels more isolated than the massive desert surrounding Big Bend National Park, where missing campers have vanished into the wilderness without leaving behind a trace. The campers who vanished into the desert. Big Bend National Park is one of the most remote places in the United States. Located along the Texas border near Mexico, the park contains massive deserts, steep canyons, isolated mountain ranges, and hundreds of miles of wilderness where temperatures regularly become life-threatening. Cell phone signals disappear quickly there. Roads stretch for miles without another vehicle in sight, and once night falls, the silence across the desert feels almost overwhelming. Over the years, multiple campers and hikers have disappeared inside or near Big Bend under disturbing circumstances. Some were eventually found after becoming lost in the brutal terrain. Others were never located at all. In 2013, search crews launched a large operation after campers traveling through a remote section of the park failed to return from an excursion into the desert. Friends reported that the group was experienced and familiar with outdoor survival. They carried supplies and informed others about their planned route before leaving camp. Then communication stopped completely. Rangers and rescue teams began searching nearby trails, canyons, and desert valleys, while helicopters scanned enormous sections of the landscape from above. But the terrain surrounding Big Bend made the operation extremely difficult. The park is vast enough to swallow people quickly. Temperatures can climb above 100 degrees during the daytime before dropping dramatically at night. Water sources are scarce. Large portions of the desert contain rough terrain capable of hiding even experienced hikers from aerial searches. Days passed with almost no evidence explaining what happened to the missing campers. No abandoned tents, no emergency signals, no clear tracks leading investigators toward the group. And while some disappearances inside Big Bend are eventually explained through exposure, dehydration, or disorientation, the isolation surrounding the park continues fueling mystery around cases where almost no evidence is ever recovered. Visitors frequently underestimate how unforgiving the desert truly is. Distances appear deceptively short beneath the open landscape. Heat exhaustion develops rapidly. And once someone leaves marked trails, navigating back through the terrain becomes dangerously difficult. But beyond the physical danger, many people describe Big Bend as psychologically unsettling, especially at night. The darkness inside the park becomes almost absolute once the sun disappears behind the mountains. Wind moves across the empty desert, while enormous stretches of land remain completely silent for miles in every direction. Some campers later admitted the isolation itself became terrifying after only a few hours alone, because in places like Big Bend, there is a disturbing realization that begins settling into the mind. If something happened out there, nobody might reach you in time. And perhaps that is why the park continues generating stories involving disappearances, lost hikers, and unanswered questions hidden deep within the desert, because some parts of Texas still feel vast enough to hide almost anything. Texas is often associated with massive highways, deserts, and endless open land. But hidden beneath that landscape are some of the darkest mysteries in America. Unsolved murders, strange disappearances, entire communities shattered in moments of chaos and violence. And the unsettling truth is that many of these cases remain unanswered even today. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and tell me which Texas mystery disturbed you the most. Because across America, there are still countless hidden stories waiting to be uncovered.